So let me tell you a story. Warning, it goes on for 8 years. But first, I'm going to talk to you about time. Time is more than one thing. Did you know that? So the writers of the New Testament talk about time in two different ways. So my birthday gift to you is I'm going to teach you 2 new words. Okay? Okay? Please receive this gift. It's from the heart. The first word is chronos. When they talk about time, one of the words they use is chronos. That sounds very familiar, right? Chronology, a sequence of events, the days of the week, weeks of the month, so on and so forth. So beginning, middle, end. The second word that they use to talk about time is not a sequence of events, and it's not chronos, and it's not predictable. Instead, this word was used to describe how several things converge at the same time for an opportunity. And that word is kairos. So time is both a sequence of events, but there are times in our life where things, we say, line up, right? And so here's the deal. If you step in faith, which is what the New Testament writers encourage us to do, in our living time, our chronos, and we trust God as we walk in faith in the kairos moments, there's a blessing to be received. Similar to Abraham. The blessing is not just for us, but it's for other people. But if you miss that window, you miss it. I mean, how many of you are sitting next to someone and you said, this is a kairos moment. I better not let this person go, right? We live with this all the time. So, you act in God's blessing, you receive the benefits, but if you miss it, you miss out. So, in my 8-year story, you're going to hear moments you're going to say, oh, that's chronos. Oh, that's a kairos moment. The 8-year story begins in 2015. I was serving at a Presbyterian church in Orange County, California. And though the congregation was filled with very, very wonderful and loving people, I knew that God was calling me elsewhere. So I began to pray and to think and to dream. And I began to experience what many people call a holy discontent. You ever experienced that? Like a holy, like surely there's more than what I'm experiencing now. Surely there's something better, something different. And I didn't want to settle. And I wanted to find a church that was the just right church. The just right church in a just right place that with faith and action can make an impact for their community. So I started reading a book written by one of my favorite writers, Diana Butler Bass, titled Christianity for the Rest of Us. How the neighborhood church is changing the world. And as I read chapter after chapter, it grabbed my heart, and I said, I want that. God, I want that. Please make it possible that I would experience that. So the author traveled the country, did a bunch of research and interviews at churches all around our country, different denominations, different settings, different like core values, I guess you would say. But they were growing, and they weren't growing, they were thriving, and they were changing their neighborhood and their city. And some of the churches embraced like radical hospitality. Some churches were making an impact because they just grabbed onto the arts or contemplation or social justice or serving their community for the good of the community. All kind of locations, all kind of denominations. And I remember when it happened. I was reading the book, the sun was setting, orange and purple in the sky, the window was open, and I could hear the wind rattling the palm trees in the back. Don't feel sorry for me. So, rattling the palm trees in the backyard. I was like, God, I really want that. I really want that. I want to be a church in a city, in a neighborhood. Cities have to grapple with complex issues, right? Poverty, education, adequate housing, diversity of all types. Diversity of all types. So God, lead me to that place. So I shared this with my wife, Barb, every day. whether she wanted it or not, okay? I would talk, and she listened. And to my dying day, what I will always lean on and love in my wife is her belief that she voiced to me. She said, JJ, you can go anywhere and you can do anything. It's like, all right. And when someone believes in you, it's octane in the gas tank, right? Right? It's octane, right? But it's not just the belief in me. It's her belief that God can produce kairos moments and that God could even give her husband eyes to see. It takes belief. So over time, I was in conversation with churches all over the place, and I saw a job posting in Poughkeepsie, New York. So I read the job packet. The job packet is 22 pages. And I feel like we're on page 4 by now, okay? So, and it was filled with who we are, who God has called us to be, and what we feel like God has called us to do and be. So I read it, and I instantly went back to my life. My sun-soaked life. And a few weeks later, I was mowing the yard. Poughkeepsie. That was interesting. So then I pulled it up on Google Maps, like the street address. I was like, oh, in the city, but it looks like they're at a convergence of neighborhoods, like 2 or 3 different neighborhoods. That's kind of interesting. So I went back to my life. 2 weeks later, I'm in my office. Poughkeepsie. How do you spell that? Check the church website. Oh, they have nonprofits using their building. Oh, they have a medical equipment ministry that serves a bunch of people. Oh, they're connected with, some of them volunteer at Hudson River Housing, and they're tackling like root issues of housing and poverty and things like that. And then I remembered when it happened. I was doing the dishes. Kids were in the backyard. And I went, Poughkeepsie. So we had, at that time, on the counter, we had a really small aquarium with 2 fish, Flame and Storm. And I looked at them, I said, okay, I'll send them my resume. And that was what was happening in California. But what was happening here, and that was 2 months. That was exactly 2 months, by the way. What was happening here for that 2 months was this. So a pastoral search process makes a church look at its soul. It is hard, right? How many of you been in a pastoral search process? Yeah. You have sainthood now. You don't know that. So, and there was a conversation that was happening that I did not find out about until 2 years later. And it was the conversation between the consistory and the search team where they were kind of working out a dilemma. We have these well-qualified people who are probably effective, but sometimes they diverge from our core values. So how do we do that? Because these are great candidates. Like, we would be blessed to have them, so what do we do? And so they decided, with prayer and a lot of conversation, that one of our core values is that we're not going to exclude anyone from this church for any reason. Not education, not politics, not gender, not sexuality, not education, nothing. No man, as the Belhar Confession says, no man-made barrier, no man-made distinction between us and them. We're all the same. We all need Jesus. So fast forward 2 years, and we were at a consistory retreat, and Chip Simon, sitting back there, was serving on consistory at that time. Our consistory is elders, deacons, and the minister. And I asked a question: when have you been proud of your church? And Chip spoke up and said, I remember when it happened. We made a decision to include no matter what, full stop. And we all cried. because it's a beautiful idea, right? And we live it. And so that conversation overlapped with my 2 months here, and it converges in the church. And so then the co-chairs of the search committee, Dick Herodes and Karen Schmidt, they reach out to me. My resume was the next. Probably in a stack like this. There's just timing, like the timing is incredible. And so we set up a phone call. Now, I'm in California, and I'm wondering, is the New York stereotype of direct talk, is that really true? Is it really true? So Dick and I set up a time to call, and Dick calls me, and we do our pleasantries, and he says, well, Jason, we want to be a church for all people, full stop, and if you can't get behind that, this conversation needs to be over. I was like, that's the most New York thing I have ever heard in my life. To me, that was the voice of a church that found itself. And to me, it was the voice of God saying, you have to live your values. You have to live your values. So we moved here, me and the traveling circus, in 2016. First time I crossed the walkway over the Hudson was with Linda and Ken Sandberg. My memory's fuzzy, but my first glass of wine at someone's house was either at your house, Dick, or with Jim and Tina Haggett when I moved here. And those initial conversations opened up like, it's possible. It's possible. And so in 2017, I went on a personal retreat. And I was praying and writing, just kind of like, okay, I've been here for a year. What in the world's going on? This is hard, all that stuff. And I was praying and just kind of in silence, and then this picture of what it would look like more to be a neighborhood church. And the picture I got in my head was that we would see people walk to church. Like, that's a neighborhood church, right? That's one of the things. If you're from Hyde Park, we accept everyone, okay? We're not excluding Hyde Park or Wappingers, other places, Fishkill. But we'd see people walk to church. And 6 months later, there's like 6, 7 people who are relatively new to the church, and we'd talk, and I'd say, hey, where do you live? Oh, just down the street. We walked here. I said, excuse me? It worked? What? And now we have day one, early learning, in our education building, and those families, some of those families, walk to our church. And if you're here Monday through Friday and you see the little school bus parked on Hooker Avenue, and you see those little kids walk into the building, you're like, yeah, that's it. A neighborhood church, in my mind, is someone looks at 70 Hooker Avenue, and they say, I don't go there on Sundays, but that is my church. That church is here for me. Not for themselves, but for me and my loved ones. Don't you want that? Yeah, it makes the community so much stronger. I have lost my place. Okay. So time came for consistory to think about. Our nursery school had made the very difficult decision to close after 60 years of service to this community. Thousands and thousands of kids have been through our nursery school, but the school board came to the realization that Kairos moments are for a reason and for a season. It's not Chronos. Chronos is eternal. Kairos moments, beginning, middle, end. And we celebrated 60 faithful years of service. And then so consistory walked through this very, very big building. And we prayed, God, this is your building. So what would you like for it to be? And what that prayer is a prayer for give us eyes to see the Kairos moments. So a little bit after that, the director of the Polish language school called and said, hey, our rental building, the place that we rent, has fallen through. Do you have any rental space? Do I have space? So that's Friday nights. And then one day, a minister knocked on the door, and he and I talked. Hispanic pastor, Pastor Lusvin, generous, big-hearted individual. And he said, Pastor, we're starting a new church to serve the Hispanic community. Do you have any space? Do we have space? We have a church inside a church. We have a chapel upstairs. And he walked upstairs, he's like, this is perfect. And now they are no longer here because someone gifted them a building. And so that person that gifted them the building was part of their Kairos moment. Isn't that beautiful? And then during that time, this group called and said, hey, Pastor, we're directors of this music group called Stringendo, and we just love to teach kids music. Do you have any space? Do I have space? You just wait. And they came. During COVID, Natasha Cherry, who serves on Common Council, that serves this neighborhood, and she also works in the superintendent's office, she called me. And she said, hey, our boys basketball team needs a second gym so that we can separate them and practice. Do you have any space? Yeah. And so I met the coach, and if you saw these young men and how they handled themselves and how disciplined and polite they are and how they cared for the building while they were and are here, you would say, this is great. It's good to be a part of a neighborhood church, to hear basketballs in that gym instead of silence. And now every summer, they spend a portion of their summer in our building. We are a home away from home for them. In 2021, Ms. Cherry called me again and said, Pastor, I wanted to talk to you on behalf of the superintendent. We're scouting places. We got state and federal funding for universal pre-K to expand it. Do you have any space? Do I have space? Yeah, come over, I'll show you. And so Dr. Rosser and people in his office came and they walked through the building, and it was like, wait, there's more? There's more? 15 classrooms? You have a gym, you have next to a city park, but next to a great playground. And I could just hear the creativity between them, like this may come true. So even like city officials and people who serve the community, they are also looking for Kairos moments, right? Everybody lives this. Everybody lives this. And over time, that has evolved into a relationship with day one. I will never tire of saying this. When the First Lady of the United States was here a few weeks ago and was talking about the importance of everybody, every organization in the community pulling together for our kids' education, it was a powerful moment to see. And afterward, Dr. Rosser and I were talking, and he said, Pastor, even though this relationship doesn't work the way that we first imagined, I know this is God's will. And it hit me that that's exactly what faith is. It never looks the way that you imagine, right? Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. talked about how life is a staircase and that faith is just taking the next step. And so God always gives us space to see our feet, but not much else, right? Otherwise, why would we need faith, right? So sometimes we want life to figure out. Sometimes I would love to tell you, like, hey, 5 years from now, this is what we're going to be doing as a church. But it's faith. It's faith. And you got to step. You got to take a step. It's hard. It's part of our discipline. So, I think we're on like year 7.5. We have been blessed. Right? And it's so that we can be a blessing. That's the word to Abraham. I will bless you so you can be a fat cat. So that you can be fat and lazy. Just live it up, Abraham. It's all for you. No, it's not even for his country. It's not even for his ethnic group or religious group. It's not even for his region. Who is God calling Abraham to bless? Every family of the world. God's vision is big. And I wonder where our vision is. right? God can do big, big things. We are becoming a neighborhood church. ING, right? There is work to be done. You and I inhabit Chronos. But I believe that God has us in a Kairos moment, and I want you to be a part of that. If you're a guest today, I'm so happy that you're here. I don't think that you will be sad to be a part of a Kairos moment. Things are converging. Things are lining up. It's amazing when a church says yes, what can happen. The other night we had consistory meeting, and we had, the closing prayer was, thank you, God, for this magical conversation. How many consistory meetings have ever ended like that? Right? It's about as many as at your workplace, right? But we had a heart-to-heart, and there was a movement. I believe that God is moving in our hearts as a congregation. I can't tell you what the next step is sometimes. I can't. I wish I could. If I could, I probably wouldn't be doing this. But we have to just trust God in the moment. The word in our second passage is this: I want to use you, and maybe you have been put here for such a time as this. Have you ever thought that? Wait, I have a role in this church? Absolutely. Absolutely. You were put here for a reason. So let me land the plane. I am your minister. I am your pastor. I want this to be the best church you've ever been a part of. For some of you, you're like, that's not asking a lot. But some of you have experienced very good churches. And I want that for the rest of the folks in this room. Do you know how many kids we have under our care as a congregation? We have 17 school-age kids. 17. Nursery and Sunday school. So what does it mean for us as a church to keep our vows, to help parents disciple and share the faith with the next generation? Because the church is reborn in every generation, right? So what does it mean for us to serve? I want to be part of a church that cares about your educational pursuits and when you start a career or a family. I want to be a church that cares about your marriage and your important relationships. So our churches typically, not always, but churches typically, but society at large usually separates people by generations. But a Kairos moment brings everyone together for each other. Don't you want to be a part of a church like that? That everybody belongs, no matter what, including age? I want that for you. I want that for us. So what's the next step for you? What's the next step? Is it baptism for one of you or your family members? That could be. Baptism is often a pivotal point in someone's life where they say, I am owning my faith. I'm going to live my values as best as I can. Is that you? For some of you, the next step may be just to revisit. It could be membership. Membership is simply stating the obvious. If you're at the point where you're talking about becoming a member, you're kind of already a member. You're just making it public. This is my people. I belong to you. You belong to me. So, it's magical. Abraham, I'm going to do amazing things through you and for others. I just need you to step forward, and I need you to go to a place you've never been to before. You know what God is saying to us? You can go anywhere, and you can do anything. So, can we believe in God and believe in one another? It's octane in the tank. So let's go.